Secretary of State John Kerry finally spoke some truth on the issue of Israel. This feels like the first time in the Obama administration that anybody in the administration kept it even a little bit real on this issue. So let's see what he had to say. You're going to see a compilation of his speech here, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Throughout his administration, President Obama has been deeply committed to Israel and its security. And that commitment has guided his pursuit of peace in the Middle East. The two-state solution is the only way to achieve a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It is the only way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, living in peace and security with its neighbors. It is the only way to ensure a future of freedom and dignity for the Palestinian people, and it is an important way of advancing United States interests in the region. We could not, in good conscience, stand in the way of a resolution at the United Nations that makes clear that both sides must act now to preserve the possibility of peace. Regrettably, some seem to believe that the U.S. friendship means the U.S. must accept any policy, regardless of our own interests, our own positions, our own words, our own principles, even after urging again and again that the policy must change. Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect. Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations, who does not support a two-state solution, said after the vote last week, quote, "It was to be expected that Israel's greatest ally would act in accordance with the values that we share and veto this resolution. I am compelled to respond today that the United States did in fact vote in accordance with our values, just as previous U.S. administrations have done at the Security Council before us. They fail to recognize that this friend, the United States of America, that has done more to support Israel than any other country, this friend that has blocked countless efforts to delegitimize Israel, cannot be true to our own values or even the stated democratic values of Israel. And we cannot properly defend and protect Israel if we allow a viable two-state solution to be destroyed before our own eyes." They are combining to destroy hopes for peace on both sides and increasingly cementing an irreversible one-state reality that most people do not actually want. Today, there are a similar number of Jews and Palestinians living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. They have a choice. They can choose to live together in one state, or they can separate into two states. But here is a fundamental reality. If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace.
That last line was spot on, and I never really thought about that, and I never really pieced it together like he just did. So Netanyahu and Likud and the Jewish Home Party, they would argue, no, yeah, we want a one-state solution. We just want Israel. That's it. Just Israel, and that's the end of the conversation. And depends what mood you catch them in. If they're being honest, they'll say, yeah, we kind of want like no Palestinians here and just to take the land. But if they're trying to be diplomatic, they'll say, no, well, we can have Palestinians here, we can have Arabs here, but it's going to be under one state, and that state's going to be Israel. Well, as he says right there, because of the demographic situation, if you have one state, well, then you can't be a Jewish state and be democratic. Because if you're a democratic state under one state that is Israel, that's not going to be a Jewish state. So which is it? Which do you want? Do you want a one state that's not a Jewish state? Or do you want to do a two-state deal where you can still say, hey, we're a Jewish state, and the Palestinians have their own state? But that's the thing, John. Likud and Netanyahu and the Jewish Home Party, they're all being massively disingenuous and dishonest actors because they do not want peace. Netanyahu wants all the land. That's what he wants, which is why he keeps taking the land and why he keeps building more and more settlements. How can anybody believe that Israel really wants peace when they keep taking more and more Palestinian land? And they keep building more settlements, and they just announced it the other day after a 14-0 vote at the UN that condemned illegal Israeli settlements. They're like, that's nice, now we're going to build more. So you can't, like, he's dropping the mask. Netanyahu is dropping the mask, and he's saying, yeah, no, I'm not for peace. I don't want peace. I don't want a two-state deal, and to the extent I'd be okay with a one-state deal, it's just going to be called Israel, and yeah, we're going to kick the Palestinians off the land, and the fewer Arabs in Israel, the better. Remember when he said during the election, oh, I see a lot of Arabs going out to vote, so you got to go out and vote. Like, what the fuck is that? Could you imagine a Republican saying, yeah, I see a lot of blacks going to the polls. You guys got to get out there. The good Christians got to get out there and vote for me. I mean, that's some brazenly supremacist shit. So the ideal situation for Likud and for the Jewish Home Party and for Netanyahu is we're going to get all the land, it's all going to be Israel, and we're going to kick you off your land. And the entire time, we will scream anti-Semitism if you dare to oppose us building more settlements and stealing more land. And it's just a gross trick. And now the U.S. is even saying, okay, man, enough. And he went on to, by the way, call it occupation. Thank you, John Kerry, for acknowledging what the rest of the world has known for a very long time, that this indeed is occupation. It is illegal under international law. He says that Israel is, quote, destroying hopes for peace. No shit. Finally, thank you for catching up to the rest of the world. Quote, virtually every country in the world other than Israel opposes settlements, is another thing he said. So here's the bottom line. They're not going to change. They're not going to do anything to move towards peace because they're not in favor of peace. That's why they're building new settlements, as the rest of the world says those are illegal settlements and you shouldn't even have the ones you already have. So since they're not going to do that, what should the U.S. do? The U.S. should say, well, we'll make you do it. Not with a barrel of a gun, but by saying no more military aid, no more aid, period. We gave them $38 billion a year. That's over $3 billion a year when you do the math on it for the extended period of time that they get it. $3 billion a year? How about we just cut that off? How about we propose our own resolution at the UN that says we recognize Palestine as a state? How about that? How about we support BDS and we sanction you? Look, if you're going to pretend like you want peace, which is what you pretend half the time, and then you're obviously going to spit in everybody's eye and move in the other direction and move away from peace, well, okay, bitch, we can play rough too. So I would do exactly what I did to apartheid South Africa. I would isolate them economically and make it so that they feel forced to go to the table to make a deal. And then you're going to accept the deal. And look, it's not going to be easy because then there are actors on the other side who aren't going to like a two-state deal, who aren't going to like the 67 borders, who aren't going to like the compromise, like Hamas, for example. But you work it out among the reasonable actors, and then you get the ball rolling. This endless talking and dancing around the issue has led to what? More settlements, more illegal activity, more bomb fests from Netanyahu of the Palestinians, specifically in Gaza, and heightening of tensions and a worse situation. So that's what I would do. That's how I would move forward. And it's nice to finally hear somebody in the U.S. say, let's keep it real. It was the Palestinians who proposed a peace deal through Jordan at the UN a year or two back, and you said no. And it's the 67 borders, and it was a reasonable deal, splitting Jerusalem, and you said no. So who's not in favor of peace here? The UN just told you you're violating international law. This is illegal. You're stealing more and more land. You're building more and more settlements. Then you said, I'm going to build more. So who's for peace here and who's not for peace? Let's stop kidding ourselves. So the U.S. shouldn't have just abstained. They should have voted in favor of the resolution condemning these illegal settlements, and I'd go further. So that's how you got to play it with Netanyahu, because he ain't interested in flowery rhetoric. He ain't interested in having his hand held and, singing Kumbaya together and being reasonable. He ain't going to be reasonable unless you make him be reasonable. So make him be reasonable.